The research station Orcs floated between two dead stars, quiet and cold. It was old, built before many of the races now, using it, had learned to trust each other. Long white corridors curved like bones through its body. Lights hummed softly, never fully dark, never fully bright. Evan stood alone in Lab 7, reading the assignment again. He was human, tall but thin, with tired eyes and hands rough from years of work. He had fixed ships, weapons, shields, and machines for half the galaxy. Still, this task felt different. Recreate ancient human armor. That was all the official order said. No explanation, no warnings. Just a deadline and a long list of observers. Around him, alien researchers watched from behind clear walls. They came from many worlds. Some had smooth skin like stone. Others had soft fur or shining scales. None of them spoke. They only watched, their eyes fixed on the black crate resting in the center of the lab. The crate was small, old, and sealed with marks no one could read anymore. It had been found drifting in deep space, near the remains of a battlefield erased from records. Inside were fragments of armor, older than most living species. Evan placed his hand on the crate. The metal was cold, too cold. It felt like touching winter itself. The lab door opened behind him. A soft clicking sound echoed as Lyra entered. She was one of the lead scientists, tall and pale, with long fingers and careful movements. Her kind valued logic above all things. "You have reviewed the task," she said. "Yes," Evan replied. "You understand this armor is for study only," she added. "It is not meant for use." Evan did not answer right away. He looked at the crate again. "That depends on what you think this armor is." Lyra frowned slightly. "It is a relic, a symbol of your species' early military age." Evan let out a slow breath. "That is one way to say it." From the other side of the glass, Council Overseer Hale raised a hand. He was broad and heavy, his voice deep and commanding. "Human Evan, begin your explanation. Why has this task required full council presence?" Evan turned to face them. "Because this armor is not just metal. It is a story." And stories like this one tend to end badly if misunderstood. Some of the observers shifted. Others leaned closer. Hale crossed his arms. "Your species agreed to share its history. We found fragments. We want reconstruction, nothing more." Evan nodded slowly. "Then I will ask one question before I begin." The lab grew silent. "Do you want the armor clean?" Evan said. "Or bloodstained?" For a moment, no one reacted. Then voices erupted across the chamber. "What does that mean? Is this a joke? Human humor is inappropriate here." Lyra stared at Evan. "Explain yourself." Evan's face remained calm. Ancient human armor was not built to look clean. If you want it true, it will carry marks. Scratches, cracks, downsides, headquarters, stains. Hale frowned. "You are implying violence." "I am stating fact," Evan replied. The council exchanged looks. Finally, Hale spoke again. "Proceed with reconstruction. Keep the design neutral." Evan almost smiled. "Almost." He unlocked the crate. The lid opened with a soft hiss. Inside lay broken plates of dark metal, bent and scarred. Some pieces were cracked through. Others looked melted as if burned by extreme heat. The surface was not smooth. It was rough, layered, like something grown rather than built. As the crate opened, the lights in the lab flickered. A low sound filled the room, not a noise, but a pressure, like distant thunder. One of the junior researchers stepped back. "Did anyone feel that?" Evan nodded. "It is reacting." "Reacting to what?" Lyra asked. "To being seen again," Evan said. He lifted one of the fragments carefully. It was heavier than it looked. His fingers tightened without thought. The metal felt warm now. Alive sensors began to blink red. "Energy spike detected," a system voice announced. Hale's eyes widened. Containment. Evan placed the fragment on the work table. Relax. It will not activate fully without a wearer. Lyra hesitated. A wearer? Yes. Evan met her gaze. This armor was never meant to sit in a display case. He began scanning the fragments. Images formed in the air showing internal layers and strange patterns. The aliens leaned closer, fascinated and uneasy.
This structure is inefficient, Lyra said. Too heavy.
Too complex. It is not built for comfort, Evan replied. Or efficiency. Then what is it built for? Evan paused. Endurance. Hours passed. The lab grew quiet again, broken only by the sound of tools and scanners. Evan worked alone while the others watched. Every time he touched a piece, the sensors reacted. Every time he stepped away, they calmed. Finally, Lyra spoke softly. Why was this armor abandoned? Evan did not look up.
Because the war ended. And the soldiers, they survived, Evan said.
Some of them. Lyra considered that. Your records list that war as minor. Evan laughed once, short and sharp. We call it minor because we lived through it. A new alert flashed. Unauthorized signal detected. Hale stood. What kind of signal? External scan, the system replied. Evan froze. Someone else knows this armor is here, he said. The council chamber filled with tension. Guards moved to their stations, doors sealed. Lyra looked at Evan. What have we uncovered? Evan finally turned to face them fully. His eyes were serious now, old. You uncovered the reason some parts of human history were buried, he said, and why some tools should never be rebuilt without understanding the cost. The lab lights dimmed slightly as the fragments on the table began to hum together, drawn closer as if pulled by an unseen force. Evan whispered, almost to himself, and this is only the beginning. Evan stayed in Lab 7, staring at the fragments. He knew the alarm would fade, but the feeling of the metal's presence lingered. It was patient, watching, as if it remembered the past and waited for the right moment. Lyra circled the table, her hands clasped behind her back. You told us it was dangerous. Now I see why. But what does endurance really mean in this case? Evan picked up a fragment that had faint scratches across its surface. Endurance is living through pain. Not running from it, not ignoring it. Humans made this armor for those who refuse to die easily. The other researchers shifted uneasily behind the glass. Some whispered to each other. One small creature, barely the size of a cat, had scaled skin that shimmered, but it stared wide-eyed at the fragments. Pain? Lyra repeated softly. You mean this will hurt the wearer? Yes, Evan said, turning the piece in his hands. It will react. It will mark every scratch, every bruise, every fear. Lyra shook her head. This is madness. Evan smiled faintly. It is history. The system chimed again. A new alert appeared on the monitor. External data readings. Something was approaching. Something uninvited. Hale's voice boomed over the intercom. All stations report intruders detected. Prepare defense protocols. Evan didn't panic. Instead, he examined the display. The readings were faint but consistent. Ships, small and fast, avoiding the station's sensors. They know about the armor, he said. And they want it. Lyra's eyes widened. We cannot let them take it. Not like this. Agreed, Evan said. But they will not attack directly. Not yet. They are testing. He returned to the fragments. Carefully, he began to scan them. Lines of light traced along the edges, forming a ghostly pattern over the table. The armor was responding again, not violently this time, but as if it were alive. It seemed to recognize the danger. A young researcher named Javo, with green scales and thin limbs, leaned closer. Do you think it could fight? Evan did not answer immediately. It fights only when it has to, he said. It does not choose. Humans did not build it to attack. They built it to survive. Lyra looked worried. But if an intruder reaches this lab, will it defend itself? Evan's expression hardened. It might, and if it does, there is no stopping it. Suddenly, a burst of light flashed outside the lab. The glass panels shivered under the impact. Alarms screamed. The intruders had launched drones at the station trying to force entry. Hale's voice returned over the intercom. Security teams to stations immediately. Lock down all non-essential areas. Evan moved the fragments into a containment circle on the table. The light patterns pulsed faster. The metal hummed, low and steady, almost like a heartbeat. It seemed to anticipate movement. The fragments lifted slightly, rearranging themselves into a partial armor frame, as if trying to prepare for something. Lyra gasped. It is assembling on its own! Yes, Evan said, running his fingers along a plate. It knows what is coming. It remembers the purpose. From the observation deck, Java whispered, This is incredible, but terrifying. Evan did not answer. Instead, he focused on the energy spikes. The armor had a reaction to external threats. He realized then that this task was more than reconstruction. It was awakening. The station's security doors slammed shut. Echoes of movement echoed in the halls beyond. The intruders' drones attempted to breach the outer panels. Each attempt was met with force fields, and each failure made them more persistent. Evan and Lyra worked silently, moving more fragments into place. He explained carefully how the armor would bind together, how it would reshape to fit the wearer. The fragments were strange, almost organic, but obeyed his gestures and voice. This is more than metal, Lyra said, her voice tight. It feels aware. Yes, Evan replied. It knows survival. It knows war. And now it knows it is being sought again. The drones began hammering at the airlocks. Sparks flew. Smoke hissed from broken conduits. The station trembled. It was not built for full combat, and Evan could feel the strain in the floor beneath his feet. Hale's voice returned, strained. Containment teams are falling back! Prepare for breach. Evan did not flinch. He continued assembling the fragments, guiding the ghostly light into forms he alone could see. The armor was almost complete now, a partial suit floating in the containment circle. Lyra placed her hand on his shoulder. You have done something none of us could. But I am afraid. What happens when someone touches it? Evan looked at her, serious. It will bond. And once bonded, there is no returning to simple observation. It does not forget pain, and it does not forgive weakness. A loud crash echoed through the station. One of the drones had broken the external glass and floated inside, silent but deadly. The security teams fired, but the drone moved too fast. Lights flickered, and the hum of the armor grew louder, stronger. Evan glanced at the partial suit. It pulsed in rhythm with the alarms, glowing faintly red at the edges. Then, almost imperceptibly, it began to lift. You see that? Lyra whispered. Evan nodded. It knows who will wear it, and it is waiting. Another alarm blared. The drones had triggered more energy surges, and the fragments on the table shimmered violently. Sparks jumped between them, forming a nearly complete torso of the ancient armor. The edges were jagged, the plates uneven, and streaks of red glinted across its surface, like dried blood frozen in metal. Bloodstained, Evan murmured. Just as it should be. Lyra swallowed hard. And if someone who is not human touches it? Evan did not answer. The fragments vibrated in his hands, humming with recognition. He could feel the weight of generations, the history embedded in the metal. From the corridor, the drones advanced. They moved like shadowed snakes, silent and deadly. Evan's heart did not race. Yet he was calm. He had faced many dangers, but this was different. The armor, incomplete as it was, seemed to give him strength. Javo and the other researchers retreated behind protective barriers, eyes wide with fear and awe. The armor lifted fully into the air, suspended as if alive. Light glinted off its jagged edges. It was ready even before a human had donned it. Lyra whispered, almost to herself, "We should not have touched this." Evan shook his head. "We did not touch it. We awakened it. Now it will choose." The drones reached the lab doors. They swarmed the protective fields, trying to break through. Sparks and smoke filled the chamber. The lights dimmed, then flickered violently. The fragments on the table shivered, vibrating as though laughing at the intruders. Evan reached out and placed his hand on the central plate. The moment he touched it, the armor's hum grew into a roar, vibrating through the lab. The fragments shifted instantly, wrapping around his arms, his chest, forming a perfect fit. It did not ask. It did not wait. It recognized the wearer. He stood up, feeling the weight and strength of centuries of human endurance. The armor was alive, but not in a way the aliens could understand. It responded only to its own purpose. The first drone struck the field. The armor reacted, releasing a pulse of energy. The drone exploded silently, vaporized before it could touch the lab. The others recoiled, confused and terrified. Evan felt the armor adjust to his movements. Every crack, every scratch on the fragments mapped to his muscles, his bones. He could feel the strength of humans who had worn it long ago, fighting battles that had been erased from records. Lyra watched, frozen. "It is..." Responding to him, she whispered, "Yes," Evan said, calm. "And it will continue to respond until the threat is gone." Outside the observation windows, more drones hesitated. They were fast, smart, and persistent. But none could match the armor's instinct. Evan stepped forward, and the fragments shifted like water, solidifying into steel. The hum became a low growl, a promise that humans had once survived and would survive again. The lab lights flickered. Smoke rose from the broken conduits. Sparks danced across the floor. Yet inside the circle, Evan stood and the armor molded perfectly to him. Ancient yet alive, blood-stained yet beautiful in its terrifying way. He looked at the intruders through the reinforced glass. They were small against him, quick, deadly. But they did not understand what had been awakened. Evan whispered, almost to himself, "History remembers, and it waits for no one." Outside, the drones faltered, unsure. Inside, the fragments of ancient armor hummed, pulsing with the life of forgotten battles, ready to teach anyone foolish enough to challenge it what humans endured, and why they survived. And that was only the beginning. Evan stood in the center of the lab, the ancient armor fully enveloping him. Each plate aligned perfectly, as though it had grown around his body. The fragments, once scattered and inert, now moved with purpose. Light reflected off their uneven surfaces, red streaks glinting faintly like old blood. The hum of the armor was low, steady, almost alive, resonating with the heartbeat of the station. Outside the reinforced glass, the intruder drones hesitated. They were designed for speed and intelligence, but they had never faced something like this. They slowed, scanning the lab and its single occupant with unfamiliar caution. Evan flexed his arms. He could feel the memory in the metal, the thousands of battles humans had fought long before. The armor adjusted to each motion, sensing his intent, balancing strength and speed. Every movement was amplified, precise and sharp. Lyra pressed herself against the observation window. Her hands shook slightly. I never imagined anything like this. How does it know what to do?" Evan did not answer immediately. He focused on the drones. It knows because humans built it to survive. Not to attack, not to kill unless necessary. But if it must, it will respond without question. The first drone darted forward, attempting to breach the glass. Evan stepped aside. The armor seemed to anticipate the movement, shifting with fluid grace. A pulse of energy emitted from the armor, invisible to the eye, and the drone was disintegrated silently, leaving only a faint trace of smoke. The others paused, clearly recalculating. Javo and the other researchers pressed back further behind the protective barriers, wide-eyed. One of the small creatures, its scales glimmering, whispered in a voice too soft for the humans to catch. "It is alive. It is aware." "Yes," Evan said, his voice calm but firm. "Not alive as you understand life. It remembers purpose. It remembers survival. And now it has me." The drones regrouped, moving faster this time, attempting a coordinated strike. They fired small energy pulses at the lab doors. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the station trembled. Evan did not flinch. The armor's hum intensified, resonating with the energy in the air. He could feel every pulse, every vibration, every trace of the intruder's presence. He lifted a hand, and the fragments around him responded. One piece extended outward, blocking the first wave of attacks. Another twisted slightly, emitting a thin line of energy that disabled the drone's sensors. It was not merely defensive. It was strategic, like the armor itself remembered the tactics of human soldiers who had once worn it. Lyra pressed closer to the glass. "It is thinking. It is thinking without a mind." Evan nodded. "It does not think in the way we do. It reacts, learns, and adapts. That is enough. That is why humans survived wars that should have killed them." The drones hesitated again, unsure of how to proceed. One attempted to circle around the lab, looking for a blind spot. Evan shifted slightly, and the armor responded instantly, blocking potential paths and reinforcing weak points in the containment area. The fragments of metal gleamed in the dim light, each edge sharp, precise, and deadly. A sudden vibration ran through the floor. Another intruder vessel had docked outside, larger and more menacing than the drones. The station shook, alarms blaring as energy readings spiked. Evan realized that the assault was no longer just a test. It was an invasion. "They wanted the armor!" Lyra's voice trembled. "Evan, if they reach this lab, they will not," Evan said quietly, almost to himself. "Not while the armor is here." He took a step forward. The armor shifted with him, plates realigning, energy pulses adjusting. The hum grew louder, resonating through the station. The fragments seemed to communicate with each other, moving as a single entity, anticipating threats and responding before they arrived. One of the drones fired a concentrated beam at the lab wall. The energy pulse met a shield formed by the armor, and the beam scattered harmlessly into the air. Another drone moved too close and was struck by a wave of kinetic energy, thrown backward into the wall and disintegrated. Evan's movements were minimal, almost effortless, but each action sent drones and attackers spiraling away. From the observation deck, Javo whispered in awe, "It is human, but not. It is something else entirely." Evan's eyes scanned the room. He could feel the fragments responding to his awareness, not just his touch. He realized then that the armor was more than a tool. It was a partner, a memory of survival shaped into metal. Every scratch, every crack, every faint bloodstain in the ancient fragments carried the weight of history. The armor was a storyteller, and now it was telling its story through him. A larger drone, heavily armed, moved toward the lab doors. It fired several pulses in rapid succession. Evan lifted his arms, and the armor formed a barrier around him. The pulses struck and bounced harmlessly off the glowing plates. The armor's energy spread out, forming a defensive cocoon. The larger drone, unprepared for such a response, faltered, its sensors overloaded, and it exploded silently in midair. Lyra stepped back, whispering, "It is perfect. Terrifying, but perfect." Evan did not speak. His focus remained on the remaining drones. They were clever, quick, and relentless. Yet they had never faced an enemy that adapted instantly, remembered and struck without hesitation. Every movement of the armor was precise, defensive, and offensive at once, a seamless integration of human ingenuity and the memory of survival encoded in metal. Another alert chimed. External readings indicated more ships approaching, larger this time, perhaps capital ships. The station could not withstand a prolonged assault. Evan understood then that his task had become urgent. Reconstructing the armor was no longer just study, it was preparation for a real battle. The fragments around him shifted again, sensing the rising threat. Energy pulses ran across the plates, forming patterns that resonated with the station's systems. Evan realized the armor could interface with technology around it, a feature long forgotten by the galaxy, a secret of human engineering lost over centuries. He placed a hand on the central plate. The fragments pulsed in response, forming a partial canopy over his head and shoulders. The red streaks glimmered more brightly, like warnings. He could feel the power of the armor coursing through him, guiding him, steadying him, connecting him to centuries of human resilience. The remaining drones hesitated, sensing the armor's intent. One of the smaller drones attempted to rush the lab from a side vent, but the fragments extended, blocking the path and emitting a wave of energy that pushed it back. Another drone tried to coordinate an attack, only to be disintegrated by a precise pulse from the armor. Lyra pressed her hands against the glass. How do you control it so effortlessly? Evan shook his head. I do not control it. It does not belong to me. It belongs to survival itself. I am its conduit, its link to the present. It remembers the past and acts to preserve the future. Outside, the drones regrouped. Their attack pattern shifted, less direct, more cautious. They had learned fear. They had learned restraint, something their creators had not intended. The armor had taught them, without a word, that humans and their tools were not to be underestimated. Evan moved to the center of the lab, fragments swirling and adjusting with him. Each movement was deliberate, precise, measured. The remaining drones faltered, unsure how to proceed. They had come for the armor, but they did not understand the will behind it. He whispered to the fragments, almost to himself. History remembers those who endure, and those who seek it will learn that lesson as well. The lab lights flickered, smoke rose from the breached conduits. Sparks danced across the floor. Yet inside the containment circle, Evan stood, the armor fully assembled around him, a living memory of human endurance. The red streaks gleamed, the hum resonated, and the fragments awaited the next move, not with hesitation, but with certainty. Outside, the drones paused again, their sensors detecting something far beyond their programming. Inside, the armor adjusted subtly, shifting its weight, aligning its plates, responding to an ancient rhythm that only Evan could feel. It was alive, not with thought, but with purpose. And that purpose was survival. Evan took a deep breath. The hum of the armor matched his own heartbeat. He could feel the memory of every battle, every wound, every act of endurance. It was not just metal. It was history. It was a warning, and it was ready. Evan moved through the lab, the armor adjusting with every step. It was not heavy, though it looked massive. Every plate flowed into place, fitting him perfectly. Red streaks caught the dim light, glowing faintly as though remembering every battle, every scar, every sacrifice. The hum of energy was steady and deep, resonating with the heartbeat of the station. Outside the glass, the drones had retreated temporarily, regrouping and sending signals to the larger vessels hovering nearby. Evan knew the station would not last long under a full attack, yet he felt calm. The armor was alive, aware, and prepared. Lyra pressed her forehead to the glass, silent. She had never seen such a display. Every fragment, every plate, moved as if it had a mind of its own. The armor was a living memory, responding not to commands but to intent, and it recognized its human wearer. One of the researchers whispered to Jivo, "It is like a ghost, but solid and deadly." "Yes," Javo replied, his voice tight. "And it is human." Evan focused on paying the vow. He could feel the fragments aligning with his muscles and bones. He raised a hand, and a shield formed automatically in front of him. It was not just metal. It was layered with ancient knowledge. Energy ran across it in patterns too complex for the station's computers to track. It was instinct, memory, and survival encoded in alloy and bloodstains. A drone crashed into the reinforced glass again, attempting to breach the lab. Sparks flew, and the impact rattled the panels. The armor's hum grew louder. Evan moved slightly, and the fragments shifted in response. A wave of kinetic energy radiated outward, throwing the drone back into the corridor. It exploded silently, scattering pieces of its own technology across the floor. Javo and the other researchers gasped. It is fighting itself, Javo said. No, Evan corrected quietly. It is protecting. That is the difference. The intruder vessels outside had started larger maneuvers. They were sending multiple waves of drones, and energy readings showed preparations for heavier attacks. The station's shields strained. The hum of the armor matched the rhythm of the emergency sirens, steady and strong. Evan took a deep breath. He felt the weight of the fragments, but also their purpose. He could feel the history embedded in each plate. This armor had survived wars, battles, and death. It was not just metal. It was the endurance of a species, and it had chosen to awaken with him. Another drone entered the lab, smaller but faster than the others. It darted around the containment circle, firing energy pulses. Evan did not flinch. The armor reacted before he moved, extending plates to intercept the attack. The pulses scattered harmlessly across the lab. The drone spun out of control, then exploded in a flash of blue sparks. Lyra covered her mouth with her hand. It is perfect and terrifying. Yes, Evan said, keeping his voice calm. That is the point. Humans survived because they faced fear and pain and kept moving forward. This armor is a reminder. He shifted slightly. The armor responded instantly, forming a partial helmet that gave him greater awareness of his surroundings. Through the visor, he could sense the drones approaching, their paths, their speed, and even their energy output. The armor was teaching him the dance of survival. Another alarm blared. The external readings indicated that one of the larger vessels had fired a heavy pulse at the station. The energy wave hit the outer hull, shaking the entire structure. The station groaned, and emergency lights flashed red. Sparks fell from broken conduits. Evan did not move quickly. The armor moved with him. Plates extended outward, absorbing and redirecting the energy. The fragments flowed like water, adapting instantly. The pulse that would have torn through the lab dissipated harmlessly against the living memory of human endurance. From the observation deck, Lyra whispered to the others, "It is more than defense. It is teaching him how to survive, and in turn, teaching us." Evan noticed the hum of the armor shift, pulsing faster. The fragments sensed the larger threat outside. He understood. The intruders would not stop until they reached the lab, until they touched the armor. The fragments prepared, forming edges and spikes, energy fields and shields, all synchronized with him. A drone managed to breach the outer security barrier and entered the corridor outside the lab. Evan felt the movement through the armor. He moved his arm slightly, and a shard of the armor extended outward, latching onto the drone. In an instant, it was disabled, falling to the floor in a pile of molten metal and sparks. The lab grew tense as more drones approached, but none dared to come closer. The armor's presence radiated a warning that they could not ignore. It was not just defense. It was power. It was memory. It was survival itself. Javo's voice trembled. "They are learning. They are scared of it." "Yes," Evan replied, "because it remembers, and it does not forget." Every scar, every battle, every mark on these fragments tells a story. That story is survival, and it is alive. Prax. The intruder vessels outside began firing intermittently, testing the station's defenses, but Evan could feel the armor adjusting. Energy flowed through it, resonating with the station's systems. It was not just reactive. It was proactive, protecting, learning, and anticipating. Lyra's eyes widened. It is communicating with the station itself. How? Evan shook his head. Humans built many things that are forgotten now. This armor is old, but it was designed to endure, not just physically, but in knowledge. It can sense, adapt, and protect beyond what we understand. The drones outside paused again, unsure of their next move. The armor's presence had shifted the balance. They were clever, but they had never encountered something that anticipated and responded with such precision. They recalculated, hesitated, and in that hesitation, they were vulnerable. Evan moved slowly through the lab. the armor adjusting, preparing for each potential attack. The fragments hummed, pulsing with red streaks, energy fields forming and dissolving in a seamless pattern. It was alive, and it had chosen him as its link to the present. He turned to face Lyra and the others behind the glass. "This armor is more than a tool. It is a reminder of what humans endured and why they survived. It is history made tangible, and it is ready for anyone who dares to challenge it." Outside, the intruder drones faltered, sensing the power within the lab. They had underestimated the human connection to the armor. They had underestimated the memory of endurance encoded in each fragment, and now they would pay the price for that mistake. Evan's eyes scanned the approaching threats. The armor adjusted, forming spikes, shields, and energy pulses in anticipation. It was not just a suit of metal. It was a guardian, a witness, and a warrior. Every movement was precise, every pulse calculated. It was history alive, and it was ready to teach, once more, the lesson of survival. The hum of the armor filled the lab, resonating with every heartbeat, every tremor, and every vibration of the station. It was a warning, a promise, and a reminder. Humans endured impossible odds, and with this armor, they could endure again. And now, the intruders would learn that lesson the hard way. Evan stood in the center of the lab, the armor responding to every heartbeat and thought. The red streaks on its surface glowed brighter with each pulse of the station's emergency systems. Outside, the intruder vessels hesitated. They were clever, fast, and numerous, but none had faced something like this. The armor was more than metal. It was memory, instinct, and survival, bound together in steel and energy. Lyra pressed herself against the glass, unable to look away. "Evan, if they reach the lab, what happens?" "They won't," he said quietly. "Not while the armor is here." It is not just protection, it is history. It remembers every battle humans ever fought, and now it has me. The station shuddered as another wave of energy pulses struck the hull. Sparks flew from the outer conduits. Alarms blared. The intruder drones advanced, testing every barrier, every sensor. They were persistent, but the armor anticipated each move. Plates extended, shields formed, and energy pulses deflected each attack. One drone darted into the lab from a side vent, faster than the rest. Evan lifted his arm slightly, and the armor responded instantly. A shard extended outward, latching onto the drone and disabling it. It fell to the floor in a scattering of sparks and molten metal. The remaining drones paused, sensing the power emanating from the human inside. Javo whispered behind the glass, "It is alive. But it is human." "Yes," Evan said. "It is the endurance of a species made tangible. It remembers the purpose it was built for, and it will not forget." The larger intruder vessels outside began to fire concentrated energy waves. The station shook violently. Emergency lights flickered. Smoke hissed from damaged conduits. Yet the lab remained intact. The armor resonated with the vibrations, distributing the energy safely across its plates, amplifying Evan's strength and awareness. Lyra watched, awed and frightened. "It is more than defense. It is teaching him. It is showing us what humans endured and survived." Evan felt the fragments pulse against his skin, responding to both the station and the intruders. The armor was aware, not with thought, but with memory and purpose. It could sense danger, predict movements, and act with precision. Each strike, each shield, each pulse of energy was a lesson learned centuries ago, now applied in the present. Another drone tried a coordinated attack, firing multiple pulses at once. Evan moved subtly. The armor extended shields, deflecting the beams. Another pulse hit, and the armor responded with a burst of kinetic energy that sent the drone spinning into the wall, disintegrating it instantly. Sparks and smoke filled the lab, but the armor remained intact, glowing with the red streaks of its long history. Lyra whispered, "It is perfect and terrifying." "Yes," Evan said. "Humans survived wars that should have destroyed them. This armor is the reason. And now it remembers again." The intruder vessels outside hesitated. They were designed for speed and precision, but they had never faced something that anticipated every movement, every strategy, every attack. The armor's presence radiated a warning that was understood by machines and beings alike. Do not challenge this human. Evan moved through the lab, the fragments adjusting with him. The armor was no longer just a suit. It was an extension of him, reacting to his intent, predicting the threats before they materialized. He could feel the history of every human battle, every scar, every act of endurance flowing through him. Another wave of drones entered the lab. They were smaller, faster, and coordinated. Evan did not move quickly. The armor did. It extended plates to intercept attacks, emitted pulses of energy to disable systems, and formed barriers where needed. Each drone was neutralized before it could reach him. Javo and the other researchers watched in silence. The small creature with shimmering scales whispered again, "It is teaching him and us." "Yes," Evan said. "It is teaching what humans endured and why they survived, and now it is preparing for what is coming." The larger vessels outside began maneuvering for a more direct assault. The station would not withstand it for long. Evan understood that the battle was escalating, and the armor's purpose was not just defense, it was preparation. It was warning. It was survival. He took a deep breath. The fragments around him shifted, aligning perfectly with his body. Energy pulses flowed along the plates, syncing with the station's systems. The red streaks glowed brighter, resonating with every vibration, every alarm, every pulse of threat. A large drone breached the outer barrier and entered the corridor. Evan felt it through the armor. He moved slightly, and a shard extended outward, latching onto the drone and disabling it instantly. Another attempted to circle around, but the armor adjusted, forming barriers and emitting energy waves that sent it back into the void. Lyra's eyes widened. It is controlling the space around it. How? Evan shook his head. It is not controlling. It is responding. Humans built this to endure, to survive, to adapt. It remembers. That is enough. The intruder drones faltered again, unsure of their next move. They had underestimated the connection between the human and the armor. They had underestimated the memory embedded in every plate. And now they were learning fear. Evan moved to the center of the lab. The fragments swirled around him, adjusting, preparing, anticipating. Each movement was deliberate, precise. The armor was alive, but not with thought. It was alive with purpose, and that purpose was survival. He looked at Lyra and the others behind the glass. This armor is history. It is memory. It is human endurance. And it is ready for anyone who dares to challenge it. Outside, the intruder drones faltered again, sensing the power and intent of the human within. They had come for the armor, but they did not understand the will behind it. The armor had taught them caution, hesitation, and respect. Evan whispered to the fragments, almost to himself. History remembers, and it will not forgive anyone who forgets it. Sparks fell from damaged conduits. Smoke rose from broken systems. Yet inside, Evan stood, fully armored, the red streaks glowing, the hum resonating, the fragments waiting for the next threat. They were not just metal. They were the endurance of a species. They were alive. And they were ready to teach the lesson of survival once more. Evan stood alone in the lab, fully armored. The fragments had merged into a complete suit, jagged, bloodstained, and alive with memory. The red streaks across the plates glowed like the pulse of ancient wars. The hum of energy resonated with his heartbeat, steady, strong, and alive. He could feel the history of his species flowing through the armor. It remembered every battle, every wound, every survival. Outside, the intruder vessels had regrouped. They were larger now, more formidable, and they carried heavier weapons. The station trembled as they fired concentrated energy beams. Sparks flew from the outer hull, alarms screamed, and smoke filled the corridors. Yet inside, Evan and the armor stood unshaken. Lyra and the other researchers pressed against the glass, watching in awe and fear. "Evan, it is ready," Lyra whispered. "But what will happen if they break through?" "They will not," Evan said quietly. "Not while the armor is here. This is not just defense. It is history. It is endurance. It remembers humanity's will to survive, and it will show it again." The first drone approached the lab doors, moving with speed and precision. Evan raised his arm slightly. The armor responded instantly. A shield formed, kinetic energy pulsed outward, and the drone disintegrated before it could breach the barrier. The others paused, sensing the power emanating from the armor. Evan's voice was calm, almost reverent. "Every fragment remembers. Every scar, every scratch, every mark of battle carries a lesson. The armor is not mine. It belongs to history. And it will teach anyone foolish enough to challenge it." The intruder vessels outside adjusted their tactics. They attempted coordinated strikes, sending waves of drones from multiple directions. Energy beams hit the lab walls, but the armor absorbed, redirected, and neutralized each attack with precision. The hum of the suit grew louder, resonating through the station, warning of the consequences of persistence. Javo whispered from behind the glass, "They are learning. They are scared." "Yes," Evan replied. "They have underestimated what humans endure and how we survive. That lesson will be taught again." A massive drone entered the lab corridor, heavily armed and fast. Evan did not flinch. The armor extended sharp plates blocking the approach. Energy pulsed from the fragments, sending the drone spinning and disintegrating into molten metal and sparks. Another attempted to flank from the side, but the armor shifted, forming barriers and projecting energy waves that disabled it instantly. The station trembled as the larger vessels fired concentrated energy pulses. The lab lights flickered, sparks fell from damaged conduits, and smoke rose from ruptured systems. Yet the armor remained steadfast, its red streaks glowing brighter with every strike, every vibration, every threat. Evan moved through the lab, the fragments adjusting and flowing like water, anticipating every danger. He could feel the history encoded in the armor, the memory of every human battle, every endurance test, every survival. The armor guided him, taught him, and merged with his instincts. Lyra pressed closer to the glass, her voice trembling. "It is more than defense. It is teaching us. It is showing us what humans survived and why they endured." "Yes," Evan said. "And it will continue to teach until the threat is gone." The intruder drones hesitated. They had learned caution, fear, and respect. The armor's presence radiated a warning they could not ignore. They had underestimated the human connection to the suit, the memory encoded in every fragment. And now they were paying the price for their mistake. Evan moved to the center of the lab. The armor shifted with him, forming spikes, shields, and energy pulses. It was not just a suit. It was a guardian, a witness, and a warrior. Every movement was precise, every reaction measured. The armor was alive, not with thought, but with purpose. And that purpose was survival. He whispered to the fragments, almost to himself, "History remembers, and it will not forgive anyone who forgets it." A final wave of drones entered the lab. They were fast, coordinated, and desperate. Evan did not move quickly. The armor moved for him. Plates extended, barriers formed, energy pulses emitted. Each drone was neutralized before it could strike. Sparks flew, systems cracked, alarms screamed, but the armor remained, glowing with the red of remembered blood, alive with memory. Outside, the larger vessels hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. They had underestimated the human within the armor. They had underestimated history, memory, and survival. And now they would retreat, their attack failing before it truly began. Evan stood in the center of the lab, the fragments glowing, humming, alive. He had survived the test. The armor had responded, protected, and taught. It was history, made tangible, a memory of human endurance that could not be erased. Lyra pressed her hand to the glass, tears in her eyes. It is incredible, terrifying, but incredible. "Yes," Evan said quietly. It is the endurance of a species. It is memory. It is survival. And it is ready for the next challenge whenever it comes. The intruder drones and vessels retreated. The station was damaged but intact. The armor had defended, survived, and shown the power of humanity's will. Evan removed a hand from the central plate and felt the fragments settle, calm and alive. He looked at Lyra and the others. Some history is meant to be feared. Some lessons are meant to endure. This armor is one of those lessons. It remembers, and it waits. It is the reminder that humans survived, and we will survive again, no matter the odds. The hum of the armor faded to a steady pulse. Red streaks dimmed slightly, but the energy remained. Evan knew the fragments would always remember, always respond, always endure. The armor was not just metal, it was humanity, alive and unyielding. And the galaxy had just witnessed its warning, its story, and its enduring strength.